Right everyone, it is Finn here and welcome to part 2 of naming the best footballer from every single African nation. Now, of course, about a week ago, I released part 1, where I spoke about the best footballer from every African nation, from Algeria all the way to Libya. And I did state in that video that if you guys did enjoy the video and got the video to 40 likes, that I would do a part 2. And of course, here we are a week later. The video only got 38 likes. As my father said when I was born, that's good enough. So of course today, we're going to be doing a part 2. I spoke about the first 29 nations in part 1, and today I'm going to be doing the remaining 25, from Madagascar all the way to Zimbabwe. And of course, guys, if you do end up enjoying this one, don't forget to leave a like down below. It does help my channel. And of course, put in the comment section, what country are you from and who is your nation's best player, even if you're not from an African nation. But of course, without further ado and without wasting any more of your time, because I've done quite a bit of that already, let's jump into it. Now, of course, nation number 1 that we are going to be talking about, it is going to be Madagascar. Now, of course, I would absolutely love to mention the likes of King Julian, but I am 21 years old and I'm probably way too old to be making that joke. It is going to be a man by the name of Marco. Give me a second here. Ilamaheritra, once again, I'm so sorry, a defensive midfielder who's currently playing in the Belgian Pro League, and up until the under-19 and even the under-20 stage, represented the French national team, but as we know, such a competitive position in the French national team, he didn't quite make the cuts, and in 2017, transferred to the Madagascar national team, where in 2019, he actually played a major role in the club's history, because in the African Cup of Nations in 2019, he scored a free kick versus Burundi to earn them their first ever win in the African Cup of Nations. As I said, not one of the biggest names in world football, but it's pretty impressive. Now, next up, we're going to be jumping into a nation that I thought was absolutely fantastic in the recent African Cup of Nations, as it is going to be Mali.
Okay, I get it. I meant to say Malawi. I'm stupid. I get it.
And there was only one man I was going to go for, as it has to be Mango. Now, of course, as we know, the striker for Mali recently transferred from Orlando Pirates to the likes of Amazulu, where, I mean, as a striker, I mean, he's pretty decent, obviously, for the Mali national team. 17 goals in 63 games, and in the South African Premier League, 54 goals in 166 games. I mean, on average throughout his career, he averages a goal in every 3 games. So, I mean, not one of the best strikers in the world, but I mean, once again, a pretty decent attacker to have. Mali is going to be the third nation we talk about, and once again, one of those nations where I look at it and I immediately know who I'm going to say, as it has to be Yves Bissouma. Obviously, the central midfielder just had a transfer worth £30 million from Brighton to Tottenham Hotspurs, which, as we know, once again, a very solid midfielder and has been a huge part of the rise of Brighton over the last 4 years. I believe that he's going to have that impact on Tottenham Hotspurs that almost Yuri Tillemans did on Leicester City. I mean, he's very, very good on the ball. He has a very, very good boot on him. And once again, he could win Tottenham Hotspurs a trophy the same way Yuri Tillemans did with Leicester City.
You serious?
Once again, I know it is a very, very big claim to say that Tottenham Hotspurs could win a trophy, but I do believe that Bissouma is the midfielder who could do just that. The next nation we're going to be looking at is going to be Maritania. Now, I did think that this nation would be slightly tricky to find a top quality player, but it was actually a lot easier than that, as it has to be the likes of Abubakar Kamara. Now, of course, if that name rings any sort of bell to your ears, it is because he recently played for Fulham for 4 years and played a major role in them getting promoted once or twice. He's currently playing in Olympiacos as a centre forward. Once again, not necessarily a top quality striker, but for Maritania and what they currently have, not a bad option. Currently 5 goals in 13 Greek games at the moment. As I said, not top draws, but an okay striker to have, I guess. Next up, we have Mauritius. Now, of course, as we know, Mauritius, one of the lowest ranked nations in the entire world. I thought it would be difficult to find a good player for them. And I mean, I was quite right with that, but I managed to sort it out as I found a man by the name of Andy Sophie, a 35-year-old striker who's currently playing in the French territory island of Reunion. Once again, I know I'm really scraping the bottom of the barrel there, which, by the way, this is Mason. Say hi, Mason. He seems to be craving a lot of attention today. But of course, looking at Mauritius, as I said, looking at Andy Sophie, I mean, as I said, in Reunion, once again, it's not the most promising strike in the world, but if it's any benefit of it, doubt that is the island that Dimitri Payet was from. So, I mean, maybe he's going to leave some sort of magic stardust on that island for him. But at 35 years old, once again, Andy Sophie, not one of the most lethal strikers out there, with 11 goals in 52 games. But as I said, it seems to be the best that Mauritius have to offer. Can you stop it? What's your problem? Okay, now jumping into our next nation, it is a slight bit of a relief because obviously Mauritius was not an easy nation to do it for. But of course, next up we have Morocco, who's one of the strongest nations we have in today's video. Now, of course, although I could have gone for someone like Ziyech or Hakimi, who are two top quality players, at the end of the day, I had to go for the likes of Bounou, who's been an exceptional goalkeeper over the last few years, obviously for both Sevilla and the Moroccan national team. Obviously recently won La Liga's goalkeeper of the month or goalkeeper of the season. In fact, one of the most promising goalkeepers out there, and at 31 years old, still has many years left ahead of him. As we know, they can play up until like 44 if Gianluigi Buffon has proven anything.
How do you do, fellow kids?
Mozambique is going to be the next country we dive into. Now, I did think that this one would be relatively difficult, but also a lot easier than I originally thought, as it is going to be Ronaldo Mandava. Once again, that kind of just sounds like how I Show Speed pronounces Ronaldo.
Cristiano Ronaldo, suey!
But of course, looking at the Atletico Madrid left back, he's really proven and made a name for himself over the last year or two. Of course, made quite a number of appearances for Atletico Madrid this season after winning the French league with Lille last season. Once again, one of the most promising left backs in the world at the moment, and definitely if you look at him for Mozambique, definitely is the best that Mozambique have to offer, playing top quality football around the world. I mean, they can be very proud of him. From one South African neighbor, we have another, and of course it is going to be Namibia next. Now, when looking at Namibia, once again, it was slightly difficult to find a player, but I did end up managing, as I found Peter Shalulul. Once again, I'm so sorry for how I pronounced that. Obviously, he is the Namibian captain. Looking at him in terms of numbers, he seems to be pretty decent. 13 goals in 46 games for Namibia. But when it comes to his appearances for Mamelodi Sundowns, that's where I really got caught, and that's what really impressed me in terms of choosing him. I mean, for Mamelodi Sundowns in the South African Premier League last season, got 23 goals in 30 games. Once again, very impressive, and really a player that seems to need more credit. We then move on to the likes of Niger. Now, when looking at Niger, once again, in terms of countries around the world, they are quite low ranked in terms of some of the other nations, so of course it was slightly tricky to find a top quality player. But I ended up finding a man by the name of Yusuf Umaru. Once again, sorry about that. But of course, he is a midfielder playing in the Tunisian league at the moment. Last season, played a major role in them winning the Tunisian Super Cup. At the end of the day, as I said, I know not necessarily a top quality player, has had 50 caps for the Niger national team, but it seems to be the best player that I was able to find. Now, going from a nation where I struggled quite a bit to find a top quality player, the next nation definitely shouldn't have the same problem, as we have Nigeria. Now, of course, as we know, the Super Eagles have some of the best players from around the world, so it shouldn't be a problem to find a top quality player. And of course, I settled with the 23-year-old striker, Viktor Ottieman. As we know, one of the most expensive African players of all time. And I mean, at only 23 years old, he's really achieved quite a lot. As we know, for the Nigerian youth teams, he achieved quite a lot. But for the senior team, 15 goals and 22 appearances. Obviously for Napoli over the last few years that he's been there. Once again, his numbers are insane. 24 goals in 51 games. And before that, obviously played for Lille in the French league, where in the 1920 season, he won their player of the season. As I said, at 23 years old, he is so promising, and I've got no doubt in my mind that he really will achieve a lot in his career. As I said, there are quite a few names I could have chosen for Nigeria, but Viktor Ottieman is just a different animal. Okay, well, now we go from the heights of the Super Eagles to Rwanda. Unfortunately, looking at our next nation, once again, it was very difficult to find a top quality player. But of course, looking at Rwanda, I ended up settling with the likes of Emmanuel Emanashimwa, a left back playing in the Moroccan league at the moment. Obviously was also part of them winning that Super Cup a year or two ago. Once again, as I said, not a necessarily top quality player in terms of world football. He is worth approximately £400,000, which is the most valuable player from Rwanda. As I said, in terms of a top quality player, I really struggled for this nation, and this is the only player that I could really find any sort of argument for. Now, it doesn't get any easier with our next nation, as it is going to be Sao Tome and Principe, as we know, one of the lowest ranked nations in the entire world, and I'm pretty sure they are the lowest ranked African nation in the current African Cup of Nations qualifiers.
I'm just happy to be here.
But of course, looking at Sao Tome and Principe, their current entire squad value is £150,000, which is less than again, Jesse Lingard will earn a week at Nottingham Forest.
No, 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 no.
I mean, can we just think about how insane that is? I mean, Jesse Lingard will earn £50,000 more a week, the entire squad value of Sao Tome and Principe. But of course, saying that, I did manage to find a semi-decent striker with the likes of Lowell, who has scored 8 goals in 21 games for the national team. As I said, once again, I did struggle quite a bit, but of course, looking at the player who seems to have played a lot of his football in South America, especially Argentina, he seems to be an okay striker, but I just can't get over the fact that Jesse Lingard will be earning more than what this team is worth. Okay, finally, big relief. The next nation we're going to be talking about is Senegal. Now, finally, a good nation to talk about. As we know, there is so much top quality talent absolutely everywhere in this team. But of course, I have to go for Sadio Mane, who the night before recording this just won the African Player of the Year for 2022. And I mean, if he's been dubbed the best player in the entire continent, it only makes sense that he's probably the best player from Senegal. Obviously, as we know, recently made a move from Liverpool to Bayern Munich, and there's no argument that Sadio Mane is class. The Seychelles are next, and we're going to be talking about Michael Mancini, obviously a 34-year-old centre-back that, once again, if that name rings a bell for you, it is because he played for Chelsea for 5 years and was part of the England youth system for many, many years. And in fact, it is so scary to think about that in 2009, he won Chelsea's Young Player of the Year and even played against or amongst the likes of John Terry. He was set to be the next big thing for Chelsea, and of course, neither for England nor Chelsea did he really set off. Obviously, looking at him nowadays, he's currently playing in League One, the 3rd division of English football, and didn't quite reach the heights that anyone really thought he would. As I said, it is a shame, but I mean, even in terms of what Seychelles has at the moment, at least seems to be somewhat promising. He only transferred to the Seychelles national team in 2022 this year and has already made 4 appearances for them. Sierra Leone is next. Now, once again, another nation that really impressed me in the African Cup of Nations, and of course I was very tempted to go for their goalkeeper of the tournament, Kamara, but unfortunately I went for a different Kamara, as I'm not too sure that the goalkeeper is necessarily the best player in the team. But of course, looking at the Kamara I chose Alhaji Kamara, a centre forward who's currently playing in the Danish league for Randers FC, and I mean, number wise, I mean, he seems to be pretty decent. 5 goals in 12 games for Sierra Leone, and in his time in the Danish league has scored 20 goals in 48 games. Once again, not the most clinical attacker in the world, but definitely a player that deserves a lot more credit. And of course, talking about credit, the next nation we have is going to be Somalia. And I mean, talking about credit, there's absolutely no one I could find for this nation. Now, no, I know, it sounds like an over-exaggeration, but looking at Somalia, they are ranked 200th in world football at the moment, and their top goal scorer of all time has only ever scored 3 goals. That's the most anyone has ever scored for this national team. I'm sorry, Somalia, but I refuse to dig further into who your best player is, because, I mean, I'm sure you'll reach places one day, but right now, it's just not your time. Now, of course, talking about it not being someone's time, next up we have South Africa. Now, of course, once again, I'm proudly South African, but one thing I haven't necessarily been proud of over the last few years is our quality of football. Now, of course, a year or two ago, I would have chosen the likes of Percy Tau, who of course was playing in the Premier League for Brighton. Unfortunately, he didn't quite achieve what a lot of other people thought he would. So at the end of the day, I ended up settling with the Bafana captain, Ronwyn Williams, who obviously was the goalkeeper in that absolute thrashing between France and South Africa. But despite that, once again, I do think that he is such a top quality goalkeeper. Just left the likes of SuperSport United and is now playing for Mamelodi Sundowns. Once again, I do feel like in terms of South African football, if we want to get our name out there and if we want to improve as a nation, we are going to have to move our players overseas. But of course, looking at Williams, currently 30 years old, for the South African national team, has gotten 10 clean sheets in 26 games. And so far in the South African Premier League, 10 clean sheets in 25 games. Once again, I know not the best goalkeeper in the world, but if you actually watch him play, he is absolutely phenomenal. His reflexes are good, and if you have a good defense in front of him, is a very solid player. Sudan is next. Now, once again, Sudan, much like South Africa, in terms of it really is a nation that seems to be utilizing local players, and therefore by using local players, it was quite hard to find their best, but I ended up going for the likes of 29-year-old attacker, once again, sorry about pronunciation, but Mohamed Abdurrahman, who has scored 16 goals in 30 games so far this season, which once again sounds like a really decent number. Once again, the quality of football in terms of comparing the Sudan league to the rest of the world, maybe not the highest quality of football, but once again, it is the best that I could find for this nation. From Sudan, we now move slightly south to, well, South Sudan, I guess, and believe it or not, this nation was a lot easier to find a top quality player for, as I managed to settle for the likes of Valentine Valentino Yule, who, once again, that is an insanely cool name, who the 27-year-old winger has been playing much of his career in the Australian League, where once again does not look like a bad option. Only made his debut for South Sudan in 2022, where he already has 4 appearances for them. As I said, has spent much of his career playing in Australia, and he's just finished a 2-year spell for Newcastle Jets, in which he gained 10 goals in 45 games for. Currently without a club, and I'm saying this, I think many clubs would be happy to snatch up a player like him. Tanzania is next, and it is going to be Ali Samata. Now yes, of course I know he didn't quite achieve what most people thought that he would in the Premier League after Aston Villa spent £10 million on him and he only scored 1 goal in 14 games. But at the end of the day, other than that, Samata is probably the best that Tanzania have to offer. Obviously, looking at him for the national team, has scored 22 goals in 68 games, and saying that although only 1 goal in the Premier League, he is the only ever Tanzanian to score in the Premier League. Obviously, playing in the Belgian Pro League at the moment, has gotten 5 goals and 5 assists in 28 games in the season that just passed, along with 3 goals in 6 Europa League games. As I said, definitely not the lethal striker that most people thought he would be, but once again, definitely, I would say that he's an okay striker. He's not too bad. Togo is going to be the next nation we're going to be talking about, and believe it or not, this might be one of the easiest nations we've had all video, as it has to be Dejene. As you know, the centre-back who has been playing for Getafe for many years has had 187 appearances for Getafe and 69 for the Togo national team. 69. Nice.
But I am 21 years old and I'm probably way too old to be making that joke.
Nice. But of course, as we know, this is a centre-back that has been linked to some top clubs for majority of his career, and I'm surprised he hasn't quite made a big move. Has a current net worth approximately of £10 million, which once again, whether he ends up making that move or not, we're not too sure. But of course, the club and country captain, once again, a very solid option and a very easy pick. Now, jumping into our final 4 nations. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, if you did end up enjoying this video so far, before we jump into our last 4 nations, don't forget to like this video down below. But of course, we have Tunisia next, now of course a nation that we will be seeing in the upcoming World Cup, and there is no surprise that they've got a lot of top quality talent in their team. And of course, once again, I've mentioned him on multiple different occasions, but it has to be Kazri, of course, the attacking midfielder slash striker, who once again, absolutely phenomenal player. I mean, in his time in the Premier League, maybe didn't quite showcase that quite a bit when he played for Sunderland, but of course, when playing for Saint Etienne, really was a phenomenal player for many years, scoring 33 goals in 100 games for them. Obviously, looking at him as a whole, has just made a move to the likes of Montpellier, and obviously as a striker for Tunisia, scored 24 goals in 69 games. Once again, 69. Nice. But of course, looking at him once again, at the end of the day, although there were 2 or 3 players I could have chosen for Tunisia, I had to choose the 31-year-old striker, as he's been so reliable for so long. Now, jumping into our 3rd and final nation, this is a player that is going to surprise a lot of people, because we have Uganda next. Now, of course, I'm probably like a lot of you people at home thinking, well, who's brilliant from Uganda? But let me tell you, well, no, seriously, let me tell you, there is a man by the name of Farak Meya, who is only 24 years old, but is already Uganda's 2nd top goal scorer of all time, which is mental to think about. I mean, as I said, only 24 years old, but has gotten 23 goals in 74 appearances for the Uganda national team. I mean, can we just think about that for a second? I mean, the fact that he probably has like, what, almost 10 years left in his career, and he's already the 2nd top, and he's only 5 goals behind the top goal scorer of Uganda of all time. Once again, this man is going to achieve a lot, and I'm going to put this prediction down. He will become a nation legend. It is now time for our final 2 nations, and of course starting off with Zambia, although I'd love to mention someone like Patson Daka, who obviously has been brilliant from time to time for Leicester City. Obviously I remember that game where he scored 4 goals in 1 in the Europa League, but of course at the end of the day, I've actually gone for the likes of Enoch Mwepu, obviously the midfielder for Brighton, who I do feel like now that Bissouma has left the club will really step out of his boots. I mean, if you look at him number wise, he's been really decent. 2 goals and 5 assists in 18 games for Brighton, and for the Zambia national team seems to play in more of a wider role. I do think that Mwepu is one of the most underrated African players in the world out there. As I said, whether you go for Patson Daka or Mwepu, I do feel like you could find an argument for either, but as I said, I do feel like Mwepu is one of those midfielders who could control the center of the pitch, and that's why I chose him. Now, of course, ladies and gentlemen, that takes us to our final African nation number 54, as it is going to be Zimbabwe, and of course, who other then Marvelous Nakamba. I mean, I was surprised to find out that his actual first name is Marvelous. For years I thought that was just a nickname given to him by Aston Villa. But of course, as we know, a very, very solid, very reliable defensive midfielder for Club Brugge, and of course now Aston Villa, where he spent the last 3 years of his career. Once again, not always necessarily going to be a starter for the club, but when he plays, he is a big, big impact player, and by far Zimbabwe is the best player out there. But of course, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for all 54 countries in Africa in terms of their best players. I want you to put down in the comment section down below whether you disagree with any of my selections, if you would have chosen someone else. Like, do you think Senegal should go for the likes of Koulibaly or Edouard Mendy instead, or any of the other nations? Let me know in the comment section down below. But of course, that was a lot of nations to go through, guys. I hope you did end up enjoying this video. Of course, if you're not subscribed, don't forget to subscribe down below. Of course, I put quite a lot of effort and quite a lot of research into these videos, so it would be very, very much appreciated. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. This has been Finn, FYNN. Until next time, cheers.